y'all! I'm Rissy, and I review things. Today, I will be reviewing Galaxy in Flames, the third book in the Horus Heresy series. If you're new here, I like to do get ready with me style videos, but with a twist. And the twist is that I review books, and the other twist is that I am absolutely obsessed with Warhammer 40k, and yeah, I use napkins for bookmarks, what of it. We'll be reviewing Galaxy in Flames by Ben Counter, and doing an all-chaos eye makeup look. But first, I must have a face as bare as the surface of Istvan 3. Boom goes the dynamite. Or the virus bomb, I guess, in this case. We'll get to that later. Alright, this is a book where a shit ton of shit happens, so we gotta, like, get moving quickly on this. Hair goes back, glasses come off. This is the book where everything turns for real. This is where Horus goes full comic book supervillain. This is the book where the traitors show their colors and turn on their brothers, unleashing a tide of blood that will consume the galaxy in flames. To start off, I am gonna say I liked this book. I certainly liked it better than False Gods. It's not that the quality of the writing is exactly better. The person they gave this book to is a dude named Ben Counter. And I don't want this to seem like I'm saying that he's a bad writer. I don't think he's terrible or anything. Ben Counter is a competent hack. There's nothing wrong with being a hack. It's a long and prestigious tradition, and you can make a lot of money that way and write really enjoyable stuff. Not everything has to be, you know, Toni Morrison or Tolstoy. My issue with Counter is a lot like with McNeil. I don't think he has the writerly chops to handle some of the more emotional parts of this story. And this is a story with some pretty big fucking emotions in it. So when we last left off, Horus had fallen to the ruinous powers, but was still keeping it a secret. He made his choice to turn against his father, believing that his father was seeking to transform himself into a god, and when he had done so, he would kill his sons, the Primarchs, and their Spesmarine legions. It wasn't a particularly convincing face heel turn, but watch my last Warhammer book review for that. But in this book, Horus is gonna put his plans into action, and the first step is getting rid of the loyalists in his legion and in the legions of the other Primarchs that he has wooed to his cause. I've designed a very special eyeshadow look for today because there's so many different Space Marine legions represented in this book. Unlike last time where it's mostly all about the Sons of Horus, this time we've got the Death Guard, the Sons of Horus, technically the Luna Wolves, and the Emperor's Children, the World Eaters. There's a lot of people running around here, so I was like, what kind of eyeshadow could I do? Should I just pick one legion? And I'm like, no, I'm gonna do an eyeshadow look based on all 4 Chaos Gods. So we'll see how that goes. The problems with Counter as an author start in the very beginning of the book, which sees Garviel Loken trying to desperately cling to the idea that if something has gone wrong, then maybe it can be fixed. He has no idea what the fuck is happening to his legion. He knows that nobody wants to be his friend anymore, except for Tariq Torgadon, his bestest bud, and that it has something to do with the warrior lodges, and that ever since Horus recovered from that mortal wound, he has not been the same. And of course, Erebus is always there lurking. Fuck Erebus. Fuck him. I mean, not for real. I suspect that would be gross. The issue here is that there's just not enough content in the beginning of the book. And what I mean specifically is we needed one last scene between Horus and Garvey. Horus is spending his time plotting how to eliminate the Loyalist Marines. So he's already decided to put them on the chopping block and he's not gonna try recruiting them, which is a little bit weird to me, right? I wanted a scene where Horus tries to convince Garvey to join his side. Horus really likes Garvey. Obviously, once he starts becoming more and more evil, he did not respond well to Garvey challenging him morally. He didn't want a Jiminy Cricket. In later books, we see that Horus really misses Garvey. It just seems weird to me that Horus would not try to turn 2 members of his Mournival. They used to be some of his closest confidants. So what I wanted was a scene where Horus tries to philosophically win Garvey over to his cause, and Garvey Garvey is just like, no, what's going on? I don't like this. And Horus is like, look, I'm making some changes, but everything will be explained once you're done with this last mission. But really what's happened is Horus has realized he can't turn Garvey, and so he's going to have him put to death. I wanted to see just a hint of reluctance on Horus's part, because here's the thing. Horus, at that point in the book, has not even fucking talked to the ruinous powers themselves. The actual Chaos Gods, like, they have not been buddy-buddy. He made it clear to Erebus that he's made his choice, but Erebus has been acting as the middleman for him. It's not like Horus has gotten to the point in later books where his physical form is mutating because he's all corrupted and shit, and he calls the Chaos Gods his bitches, basically, and says that he can rule them. We haven't gotten to that part. What we have is, in this book, a scene where Erebus summons up a fucking demon and negotiates with Horus on behalf of the Chaos Gods, and I'm like, that's it? If I were Horus, I would have demanded to meet them in the fucking flesh, the warp flesh, before I agreed to any kind of deal. You see what I mean when I say that there's stuff missing from the beginning of this book? We needed a longer transition period. It makes no sense that someone who had been as noble as Horus was just immediately fall off this fucking cliff. Instead, what we get is Garvey having to work out in the training cages basically by himself. He's not allowed to hang out with his human friends, Mercedes Olaton and Carol Cinderman, anymore. Horus is locking down everything, and that includes the Remembrancers. And I will say it's a pretty magnificent scene when those chickens come home to roost. You also have Euphrates Keeler, who at the end of the last book was in a fucking coma after she used her powers of venerating the Emperor to drive off a chaos demon. She's been recovering from that ordeal, and Horus decides to have her killed too. Members of his, well, the human members of his crew are basically starting to worship her as a living saint, going along with the rise of the cult of the Emperor. There's a cool side character, Emme Singh, who is the head of the astropaths, and astropaths are these blind psychics that use their psychic powers to navigate spaceships through the warp. Horus slaughters his chief astropath, Emme Singh, to summon that demon to talk to him, because I guess a very worthy offering was necessary. But before she dies, she communicates, like, telepathically to Carol Cinderman that Euphrates Keeler is in danger. Cinderman goes off to the rescue with a couple of people that were introduced in False Gods, who are pilots of a Titan. If you don't know what a Titan is in the Warhammer world, they're these gigantic war machines that are piloted by humans, like a mecha, like a really, really big, scary mecha. One of the people is a skeptic about the cult of the Emperor, and the other guy is a true believer. Our Scooby Gang shows up to move Keeler from sickbay, but Maggard shows up. Fucking Maggard, man, from the last book. I hate that guy. And he's all, like, beefed up on surgeries that he's had, because when the various Primarchs were rediscovered by the forces of the Empire, a lot of them had human friends who were too old to be made into specimens. The younger you do the transformation, the more likely it is that they'll survive. Some of the Primarchs had their human friends who were too old, given the closest thing you can get to being made into a Space Marine, and so Maggard has had all of those treatments, so he's extra gross now. Malagurst the Twisted, Horus's right-hand man, has sent Maggard to kill Euphrates Keeler. People use this to justify why Maggard is in the story, and it's like, what on earth is there that Maggard can do that a Space Marine can't do? Did we really need this kind of human guy? Especially since all the Remembrancers and mortal crew members are being locked down. It's actually kind of weird that Maggard is walking around being all kind of human, as opposed to the Space Marines who have pretty much the run of the place. Maggard shows up and is totally gonna kill them all, and then Euphrates opens her eyes and freezes him in time before he can physically attack them, and they bust the fuck out of there. From that point on, they have to keep moving around Horus's ship and not get caught so that she doesn't get killed. Honestly, I'm a little bit disappointed in Horus. If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. Why couldn't he waddle his 11-foot ass down there and just kill her on his own? He could just tell people he was going down there to visit his wounded troops or some shit. Garvey knows shit is going wrong, but then news comes that they're gonna be fighting on a world called Istvan 3. The other thing that's kind of weird about this is that there's now, like, a temple for human sacrifice hidden away on the ship. And I get that Horus and Erebus would want to hide that because otherwise the loyalist Marines would probably be like, what the fuck is this, guys? Why are there human remains and ritual symbols drawn all over? I don't get it. At the same time, we know that a lot of the conversion of formerly loyal Marines to the dark side is happening through the warrior lodges. And it's weird that Torgadon was completely frozen out because Torgadon was a member of the warrior lodge. Nobody talks to him about anything either, and that's fucking weird. I wanted more scenes where the bad guys are trying to convert more of the good guys. Why didn't they just lay it out there like, look, you guys, we've decided that we're evil now because we think my dad is actually more evil and hates us all. If they actually laid out their case, I'm sure they could have convinced some of the loyalists. Could Horus not have used his new warp juju to show them the visions that he saw? It feels like a Dungeons & Dragons campaign that's been put on the rails where like the game master isn't letting you do anything because it might interfere with their plot. Horus is this great commander and leader of men. Why would he waste troops in a bloody conflagration without at least trying first? The story has a lot of tragic emotional beats and Ben Counter is just not really good at writing those. His strengths as an author lie in him writing scenes of combat and camaraderie in combat. I think those parts towards the end of the book, those are actually pretty darn good. Oh, and Fulgrim, Primarch of the 3rd Legion, the Emperor's Children, at one point shows up and walks away with the Anathame after a special secret conversation with Horus. Garvey's like, ah, fuck, that goddamn thing. What he uses it for, of course, we will have to discuss in a review of the 5th book in the series, Fulgrim. That brings us to the Emperor's Children, and we need to talk about the Emperor's Children. I have avoided doing so thus far, even though they have been a part of the series, mostly because I didn't want all of my reviews to be like an hour and a half long. One of the scenes that I did actually like was where Fulgrim has come aboard the Vengeful Spirit, Horus's ship. The Mournival is attending to Horus as he greets his brother. Horus is like, okay, Garvey and Torgadon, you're just here to be pretty, don't talk. And they're like, what did I do? I totally wish Garvey had just gone up to Horus and talked to him. Or something. So the Emperor's Children, not the Primarchs. This band of Emperor's Children is the 3rd Legion of Space Marines. They get to call themselves the Emperor's Children and get to wear the Imperial Eagle on their power armor because they're just so fucking awesome that the Emperor's like, you guys are great. Their whole thing is striving for perfection in all things, and their Primarch Fulgrim is absolutely the most fabulous of the Primarchs. He's stunningly gorgeous. He has this long fall of silver hair and spectacularly beautiful. He loves art and music. Before he went bad, he's an Epicurean, and then he makes the transition into full-on hedonism as part of his turn to the dark side. And because they are obsessed with perfection, that's why their military track record is so great. Over the course of these 3 books, we've gotten to know 3 members of the Emperor's Children in particular, and those are Saul Tarvitz, Lucius? I forget what his last name is. And Idolon. That fuck. We met these guys in the 1st book when they were trapped on a planet called Murder fighting megarachnids, which is so fucking badass. I love it. I like how Games Workshop has never shied away from putting shit like that in their books. Saul Tarvitz is our main guy, and I love him. I love Saul Tarvitz. He is a line officer. I'm not sure what that means. Is he like a petty officer? Is he a sergeant? He is a captain, I think? Yeah, Saul Tarvitz is the 1st captain of the Emperor's Children. Generally, the way things work with Space Marines is that the 1st captain is always a big fucking deal. It's really weird that Fulgrim and Lucius and Idolon are always like, gosh, Saul, you could be so cool, but you're just a line officer. He's the 1st captain, what the fuck? Saul Tarvitz is not nearly as flashy as his counterparts, and he's best buddies with Lucius, who, of course, if you know anything about the deeper Warhammer lore, there's a dude named Lucius the Eternal, and this is him. Lucius the Eternal is a swordsman who, if you defeat him and kill him in combat, he comes back and possesses your body. Yeah, that shit is fucked up. But that's in 40k, this is 30k. Just a really good swordsman with a formerly perfect face. Lucius is really like swaggering and arrogant. He's the really hot bitch in school, and Saul Tarvitz is his really good looking friend, but it's like in Jennifer's Body where Megan Fox is the hot one and Amanda Seyfried is the ugly friend. I mean, that's just how great a swordsman Lucius is. Everybody is always shitting on Saul Tarvitz for not being more fabulous. They're like, oh, he's a solid line officer, but he'll never be anything more. But then they'll always say, well, we need good men like Saul Tarvitz to be solid line officers. You need solid line officers, but you're gonna crap on them. What is wrong with you? That's not perfection, you idiots. But they are nominally friends, even though Tarvitz realizes that Lucius has some weird fucking tendencies. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, Lucius's face is all fucked up because he and Garvey got into a sparring match. It was the sort of thing where Lucius is like, ha 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 ha, look at me flash my sword around. I'm so flamboyant, stabby stabby. And Garvey's like, punch. This broke Lucius's nose, and you find out in a later book that this just really fucked his shit up. And so he started cutting his own face every time he kills someone. So he's real fucked up looking by this point. All right, the first non-black color is gonna be this beautiful Nurgle green. It took me a while to find appropriate eyeshadows for each of the 4 Chaos Gods, but I did it. Poor Lucius, his face is kind of gross now, but at least he's still fighting on the side of good for a while. He's very vainglorious and kind of a shitty asshole. And then finally we have Idole, so the Lord Commander of the Emperor's Children, who's just such a shit, and he's an incompetent shit too. In the first book, he is responsible for getting a shit ton of his own Marines killed on the planet Murder fighting the Megarachnids. I love saying that. He's such a fucking glory hog that he can't handle the idea of anybody but him getting all the glory, and leads his men into bad situation after bad situation. And when the Marines actually start figuring shit out, Saul Tarvitz and Lucius do a lot of the work, and he takes credit for it. Because he's much more fabulous than Saul Tarvitz, Fulgrim likes him a lot more. We know that Fulgrim's kind of shallow, even when he was a good guy. The blue was the hardest color to find because I wanted just that electric Zinch blue, and I think this color is friggin' fantastic. And also there's a guy named Fabius Bile, or Fabulous Bill, as he's oftentimes called in the fandom, who is Dr. Mangala on steroids. Literally on steroids, because he's a space marine. He's the apothecary, so ostensibly he's in charge of patching up space marines after they get wounded in battle. But what he's actually in charge of is horrifying experiments on his fellow marines to try and make them perfect, and this often includes implanting them with alien shit and just being like, well, let's see how this works. He offers this to Saul Tarvitz at one point, and Saul Tarvitz is like, nah bro, this shit is fucked up. That's what makes the final decision as to whether or not Saul Tarvitz can be trusted with the New Order or is going to go down to die on Istvan 3. Oh yeah, that's Slanesh purple, man. So pretty. So we've got the Primarch Fulgrim, and then finally, rounding out our cast of Emperor's Children, you have the Dreadnought, Ancient Rylanor, and I do not have words for how much I fucking love Ancient Rylanor. I love him so much. I loved him from the first moment we met him. So he's a dreadnought. When a space marine has been grievously wounded way too much to continue living, they've been mortally wounded, all their limbs have been blown off or something along those lines, and they're still technically alive. If they still have vital functions left, they can be put on life support into a dreadnought, and they pilot the dreadnought, so it's more like a traditional mecha, and they're in a what's called a sarcophagus in a big vat of disgusting amniotic fluid. And they can basically live forever. They spend most of their time in a kind of stasis. They are awakened in times of great need. They're really, really powerful when they're on the battlefield, and I've loved all the Dreadnought characters that I've met thus far. I'm sure that'll change at some point, but I love them. I love them so much. They're wonderful, especially Ancient Rylanor. He is called Ancient because he is old. This is a title of veneration and respect. He's in charge of the ritual traditions of the Emperor's Children, and so his official title is the Ancient of Rites. He's like a little bit grumpy, but has a softer side. This hulking slab of metal and machine, but he has a very delicate consideration for the way that things ought to be, and is firmly on the side of right. God, I just love him so much. I love you, Rylanor! I wish I could marry him. Most of the Emperor's Children are being sent to Istvan 5, but that's for a different book. Fulgrim is only sending a relatively small force down to Istvan 3 as part of his plan with Horus to purge the Loyalists from within his own legions. As it turns out, Istvan 3's population is full of secret Chaos Worshippers, which is like every other fucking planet that the Space Marines are fighting on is full of secret Chaos Worshippers, but whatever. They're also ostensibly supposed to be getting support from the World Eaters Legion and from the Death Guard, whose Primarchs have also fallen to the forces of evil. Gotta get that corn red. You've got Euphrati Keeler bouncing around all over the place on the Vengeful Spirit. Garvey Loken trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. Loken actually finds the Temple of Human Sacrifice on board the Vengeful Spirit and confronts Abaddon about it. And Abaddon is the one that he has the big emotional scene with, but it's not the fucking same. Ben counter. Meanwhile, with the Death Guard, you have a dude named Nathaniel Garrow, who's going to be very important, even if he's basically just a poor man's Garvey Aucoin. I fucking said it! And Garrow is blood brothers with Saul Tarvitz. This is very important. Garvey reaches out for some help because he's really worried about his Remembrancer friends. He finds a space marine called Iacton Cruz, who is referred to as the Half-Herd because he's really old. Well, for a space marine, he's old. And this means he's perceived as kind of doddering and partially senile, so nobody pays attention to what he says anymore. Here's another logistical problem I have with these books. Originally, all of the Space Marine legions were from Terra. The Luna Wolves, who eventually became the Sons of Horus, are no different. So Horus, on his planet of Chthoniya, which is this cold, nasty world full of gangs, a lot of his Space Marines come from there, but the original Luna Wolves were from Terra. Space Marines can live hundreds and hundreds of years. Ostensibly, they could live forever. I honestly think the series would have benefited from everybody sitting down and coming up with a Bible beforehand. This is how much time everything took. These are the principal players. This is what they did, as opposed to what feels like this kind of shotgun approach where they're just figuring shit out as they went along. And obviously this is Monday morning quarterbacking. Shit like, well, did the Empire actually have a golden age at all? Because it seems like midway through the Great Crusade is when everything fucking falls apart, and the Great Crusade's only been going on for a couple of hundred years at this point. How does this relate to Iacton Cruz? Well, he's a Chthonian. Why would he be a Chthonian if he's that fucking old? If he's old enough to have gray in his hair and whatnot, he shouldn't have come from Chthoniya, because that's way too recent. He should be a Terran. I know it's kind of petty, I guess, but I just feel very strongly about Space Marines. I found this really amazing sickly green shimmer shade that I think I'm gonna use to do a full eye look when we get to some of the Death Guard books. This is from a Black-owned Canadian indie brand called Shine by SD Cosmetics, and their shit is amazing. Garvey and Torgadon are going down to Istvan 3, and Garvey asks Iacton Cruz if he will help take care of his Remembrancer friend. Mercedes Oleton and Kirill Cinderman and Euphrates Keeler. They are very important to me. Please keep them safe. I, in particular, notice that Mercedes Oleton was the first person he mentioned because I am a die-hard Mercedes Oleton Garvey Aucoin shipper. They were meant to be together. They are totally in love with each other. Nobody can convince me otherwise. This would have to be a tragic romance. I'm okay with that. I like tragic romance. So of course she was the first person in his thoughts because he loves her. So Garvey's like, hey, old guy that everybody forgets is alive, can you take care of my friends? Iacton Cruz is like, yeah, absolutely, I can do that. And he's, I think, kind of just grateful that somebody remembered he existed, which is just sad. I feel for Iacton Cruz. What happens is Iacton Cruz arranges for these Remembrancers to escape, to get the fuck off the Vengeful Spirit because Horus has decided that it's time for the Remembrancers to fucking go. He herds them into a giant auditorium and makes them watch scenes of the shit that's happening down on Istvan 3, and he's like, this is war! Also, you're all dead! And just has his traitor marines just kill all of them. Euphrates Keeler's like, I have some premonitions. We can get out of here. Don't worry, you guys. First Cruz shows up to help them. They manage to get on a small craft and exit, but before they do that, they have to fight somebody. The person Iacton Cruz has to fight is Maggard. And he kills him. Although, it's really cool that we get to see Iacton Cruz like kind of remembering who he is as a noble warrior and just beating the piss out of somebody, but actually, Maggard kind of gets the better of him at first, and I was just like, really? He's just an augmented human. That's why I think Maggard should have been replaced by a Space Marine. I think it would have been way cooler for Iacton Cruz, this old Space Marine, to triumph over a young Space Marine rather than a dude who's been fed a lot of steroids. Then, they manage to get picked up by Nathaniel Garrow aboard a ship called the Eisenstein, and of course the fourth book is called Flight of the Eisenstein, which will obviously touch on all that shit. Apparently black eyeshadow can kind of be hard to work with. This one is really good. This is from NABLA Cosmetics. Every single eyeshadow used in this look is from an indie brand. NABLA has an unfortunate name that makes me think of NAMBLA, but it can't be that because they're Italian. I don't think they have NAMBLA in Italy. So the Scooby Gang gets away from the Vengeful Spirit, which means that they can go out into the world and tell everybody just what the fuck is happening, which is very, very important. I love it that the Remembrancer characters haven't been just dropped unceremoniously, that they've continued to be a thing and will continue to go on being a thing. I've always loved that conceit of some of our initial viewpoint characters being Remembrancers, war journalists. I love that the books have kept that. So that's where the Remembrancers go, and we will leave them there until book number 4. Meanwhile, down on the planet, fight against the evil Chaos Worshippers. The evil Chaos Worshipper inhabitants of the planet Istvan 3. I should make it clear which groups of evil Chaos Worshippers we're talking about here. Goes pretty well. This then all the loyalists start getting gunned down. More importantly, Horus had decided that the way that he's gonna ensure that all of these people are just dead is to use the Life Eater virus. The Life Eater virus is this horrifying product of modern imperial science that even the Emperor doesn't really like having it used because it's just so awful. What it is this incredibly powerful virus that just reduces anything organic to nothing. The signal is given, the traitor Marines know what's up, so they can bunker down. That Titan, that 2 of its pilots helped save Euphrates Keeler, so the Titan is there. The True Believer guy is like, wait, we can't gun down those Death Guard guys. Those are our dudes, we can't kill them. And the commander is like, kill them! They find out about the virus bombs, and the commander, again, just seems completely blasé with it. It's like, yeah, virus bombs, whatever. They're able to close down all exterior ports on the Titan so that they don't get the virus. And then fight for control begins between the loyalist believer and the skeptic and their captain. Their captain is firmly on the fucking side of the traitors. No question there. And the skeptic ends up falling to darkness because, as he says, his only real motivation in life is not spiritual. He wants to command a Titan someday. He wants to be the one in the big chair. I hope we see these characters again. I hope that choice continues to haunt him. The True Believer guy gets yanked, and that's that. Salt Harvitz, by the way, is the one who finds out about the virus bombs while he's aboard his ship and is like, oh fuck, I have to get down there out of the planet and warn people, which he does. Salt Harvitz is very fucking awesome. This leads to him and Lucius getting firmly punted into the camp of loyalists that must be killed, and Lucius is like, wait, but what? But I'm really awesome. It's just his association with Salt Harvitz that has made Fulgrim decide that he clearly cannot be trusted to be properly evil. This becomes important. Once they have all realized that they've been betrayed by their own Primarchs, the various loyalists decide to make the fucking best of their situation and not go out like chumps. A lot of them are able to get to shelter deep enough underground. Any kind of bunker that can basically be sealed against gases can protect them from the Life Eater virus, which the bombs drop. All the organic matter on the planet is liquefied in a matter of seconds. It's very unpleasant. But then once the danger is over, the loyalists come out swinging. This is when the book actually starts to get good, in my opinion. Shit is at its most tense and exciting in terms of combat. When we don't necessarily need to worry about the big emotional beats, we can just have a good old-fashioned slugfest. Between Tarvitz, Loken, and Torgadon, they manage to rally the survivors and hold out for weeks on this planet. And of course, they have no food or supplies, but Space Marines can literally survive off of jet fuel if they have to. Normal considerations like food and water aren't really a problem for them. Horus makes a pretty critical mistake here. Once he finds out that some forces have survived the virus bomb, he kind of loses his shit and decides that they're not gonna get away with that. His forces are going to eradicate them no matter what it takes because he can't lose. This is his first engagement as the newly minted War Master of the Ruinous Powers. He cannot be seen to lose his first go out, but instead of having the planet bombarded with actual bombs, he actually commits a bunch of his own forces and there's weeks and weeks of bloody combat. And I actually really liked that scene because it shows Horus's flaws. The cracks are already appearing. That he's so fucking hubristic and sure of himself and he can't bear to have even the hint of an L on his scorecard. Not even once. That he way overcommits himself and wastes a shit ton of time dealing with remaining loyalists in his forces. Down on Isfan 3, we get all these awesome scenes of our surviving loyalists holding out against truly impossible odds. And they're basically only alive because Horus is a hubristic asshat. Hopefully that doesn't look too clown-like. The eye makeup is a little circusy, whatever, we'll see. You get all these great scenes of them extending this last stand as long as it could possibly be extended. It's truly impressive just what they're able to do with these teeny tiny groups of survivors. None of the Death Guard loyalists survive. The Death Guard are generally pretty hard to kill, but unfortunately most of them got locked out of bunkers and whatnot when the virus bombs dropped. There weren't many of them that survived to begin with, and all the rest of them get taken out pretty quickly. There are some loyalist world eaters, plenty of loyalist emperor's children, and of course loyalist Luna wolves. Now what's funny about the world eaters is that Angron, who is angry, is their Primarch. He insists on going down to the planet to kill off his own men. Horus is like, no, wait! Oh, fuck. Now he's truly overcommitted, which is pretty entertaining because, again, it shows Angron cannot properly be governed. He's not controllable at this point, and Horus is just gonna have to deal with that shit. Oh, wait, maybe, like, turning to the forces of evil was a bad plan. Now that you have to work with fucking psychopaths who don't understand anything other than charge! The glorious last stand, of course, can't last forever. Horus just gets really fucking fed up. He sends pretty much everybody down to the planet, and then after that has the planet bombed for real. Meanwhile, Garvey instructed ancient Rylanor to go someplace. We don't find out where until one of the greatest short stories ever happens, but this is all later on. I'm not gonna spoil that in case you haven't read it. Oh god, it's so great though. I fucking love Rylanor! Otherwise, it's just last stand after last stand. Eventually, Lucius gets so fucking sick of being lumped in with Salt Harvitz. Everybody loves Salt Harvitz because, yeah, he's just a line officer, but actually he's just so incredibly steadfast and loyal and true. He's just a great fucking guy. Eventually, Lucius gets fed up with everyone loving Salt Harvitz and not him, that he betrays Tarvitz and his own loyalists and negotiates to rejoin the Emperor's children and firmly commit himself to the forces of evil. He and Tarvitz have a fight, one last fight, and Tarvitz is no match for Lucius as a swordsman. Nobody is. But he remembers Garvey's lesson, just hauls off and whacks Lucius in the face with his fist. It's awesome. Reinforcements arrive at the last fucking minute and shoot Lucius, and he has to run away in disgrace. It's obviously not the last we'll see of him. I thought it was cool that Counter brought that back. Surprise is perhaps the greatest weapon of all. But all good things must come to an end. Horus gets so fucking fed up that right before he has the planet bombed, he sends in the Titans, and he sends in Abaddon and Little Horus, Horus Aximand, to finish off Garvey and Torgadon specifically. Garvey manages to briefly trap Abaddon, who's wearing Terminator armor, which makes him fucking 10 feet tall. Garvey manages to trap him under some falling debris, but then gets trapped himself. Torgadon gets his head cut off. Yeah, Horus Aximand fucking beats the shit out of him and then decapitates him. But as he's doing it, he's like, I'm sorry! And then he starts crying uncontrollably, and Abaddon is like, Jesus fucking Christ, why? Aximand is like, they were our brothers! And of course, Aximand is the melancholic one of the bodily humor quartet that is the Mournival. He is just absolutely consumed with it after this happens, which I thought that was a nice detail, that you have the reluctant follower Aximand to go with the super aggro Abaddon. Abaddon beats the living shit out of Garvey, but then Garvey gets trapped under debris when the Titan strolls through, and so Abaddon does not get the last laugh there. Garvey is, however, buried under rubble, and that's where we leave him at the end of the book. I love you, Garvey. The final scene with all the loyalist bros is them waiting for death to come because the planet is being bombarded. They're all kind of standing around, sort of singing Kumbaya the way Space Marines do, which is, you know, being super noble and warrior-like. I do love the description that there's some Emperor's children and Luna wolves and even a few lost-looking world eaters, and I just imagine they're like, what the fuck is this Kumbaya shit? Like, we're world eaters, but they're still loyalists. They just want to know that their deaths meant something. And Salt Harvitz gives this really rousing speech. He's like, yeah, we hurt them, we delayed them, we did everything we could possibly do and more. They will remember this. This is a black mark on their honor, not ours. And then the bombs fall. And that's, I would assume, the last of Salt Harvitz. I love you, Saul. I don't know if I love you as much as Ancient Rylanor, but I do totally love you. The final scene is Horus Aximand being consumed with doubt inside the Vengeful Spirit, and Horus telling him that we got shit to wrap up at Isfan 5, and then we're going to Terra. And that's it. It's a very momentous book. All sorts of shit happens. And I really liked parts of it. I thought once the actual action starts to go, it gets really good. It's just, the shit leading up to it was not as good as it could have been, and I think it needed a different writer than Ben Counter. Could we not have gone back to Abnett for this? Abnett is actually really good at the emotional stuff. So this is the final look. It came together pretty well. Not maybe, you know, wedding makeup, but so what? There's my chaos eyeshadow look, which I hope you like. I hope this has been entertaining. My overall verdict is I liked this book, and it's a very important book. Obviously, if you're reading the Horus Heresy, you should definitely not skip this one, but not as good as it could have been. Next time, of course, will be The Flight of the Eisenstein, where we can see what happens to our Remembrancer friends, and of course, what's happening with the Death Guard, because we didn't really spend all that much time with them. Intrigue and war journalism await us, my friends, but until then, bye y'all!